I know some of you are going to look at this and say I need to lower it. Some of you are going to look at this and say I need to raise it. But I like it. And last I checked, it's my car. Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears, your Hanlon's razor of automotive stupidity. It is about 100 degrees, and I have clearly turned to high fashion with my cargo shorts and work boots. We're back here with the Prelude, and we are so close to finishing this massive suspension project that I've been working on for the past 2 months. Now, most of the time was spent waiting on parts. I tried to order everything I could up front, but there were some surprises down the line. There were some cancellations and supply chain, blah, blah, blah. But really what it comes down to is that this car is getting harder and harder to find parts. So I'm really glad not only that I found all the parts that I needed, but also that I'm doing this now. Because if I wait any longer, who knows if the parts I need will ever be in stock by anyone ever. So what all did I do? If you've been following this project, I started with the front end. I had a wheel bearing that had gone bad, which prompted me to just kind of do everything. I had suspension bushings sitting on the shelf for a good 2 years, so I decided, well, why don't I just go do that as well? And once I started taking everything apart, I started splitting ball joints and tie rod ends, and I just said, all right, I'll replace those too. And so it ended up being kind of a massive overhaul. I did everything except for the coilovers. And I might have to also do the coilovers. I was able to track down pretty much everything I needed thanks to the Prelude Power community. Also thanks to the 3rd generation Prelude enthusiasts group on Facebook. Everybody there is awesome. Most of those are the OGs from Prelude Power anyway, so nice to be around my own people. I've been with this car for a long time. I've been in the community for a long time, so it's just really cool to have that kind of, give and take among people that you've been involved with for such a long time. So getting back to the car, I had a little bit of an issue with the steering rack, as I'm sure if you've watched my videos, you can imagine what I'm talking about. But that's all done now. We've moved on to the rear in my last video, and I got the rear mostly done. I just had a few odds and ends left to do, and we're going to take care of that in this video. And we're also going to do a good enough alignment. I'm going to take it to a shop, but I haven't found a shop yet. And in order to get to that shop, I gotta make sure the wheels are at least more or less in agreement. Right now, the 2 front wheels are pointing in different directions. I'm sure the rears are gonna be as well. So they all need to be kind of pointed in the same direction. And luckily, this car makes it easy. That's like the only time I've ever said that about this car. Doing a toe alignment on this car is actually really easy because the front and rear racks are linked together mechanically by a shaft down the middle. Now, if that's all they did, that would make it a lot harder. But they also included the ability to lock the rear rack. And since they're linked together, that means locking the rear rack also locks the front, so you can do a toe alignment right here in the garage without any special tools. You just need a little dowel pin that I lost. So enough filibustering. Let's get into the car. Let's get the suspension back together. All right, this is where I left off. I'm going to start by putting the exhaust heat shield on, and then I'm going to put the exhaust can on, which is over there, just past my motorcycle. And then that should go quick. Once that's on, I can put the sway bar on. The sway bar on's over here, and I've got the bushings for it on the trunk lid of my TR7 along with the brackets. Well, I'm looking for a gasket to seal that up, and unfortunately I couldn't find an exact fit. So this is the best I could do, and I'm going to have to cut this out to fit. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a square that's a little bit bigger than the flange. And then I think I'm going to cut the bolt holes. And then once I have the bolt holes cut in, I can thread some bolts through and then cut the mouth of, the opening there. All right, there we go. This is probably a really stupid idea, but I got the holes cut out. The exhaust is dropped again. So I'm in for some fun when I go to put it back in. So the idea is that once I have this thing on with the bolts threaded in, I'm going to trim away at this square here so that it's closer to the shape that it's supposed to be. You can see that the hole it's close enough. It's not going to cause any restrictions. Oh, I love new problems. So I got the exhaust hung with the new exhaust hangers, and this is too close to the bumper. In fact, it is touching the bumper. And even worse, let's go underneath the car. This exhaust collector is right up against the side of the car. Oh, it is finally done, and look at that fitment. I could not have asked for better. The first thing I did was drop the muffler. I had to disconnect up there again and all of these three little hangers, and I started to adjust the hangers, and I say that with very heavy air quotes. I took a sledgehammer to them and banged on them, but I don't think I really did much because it's all stainless steel. So they didn't really bend very much, but I may have done just enough between that and all of my efforts to not touch the bumper. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then over here, I adjusted the hanger a little bit over towards the passenger side. At least I tried, and I may have ended up just pulling on the metal of the muffler itself, of the pipe itself. But that's okay. It all worked out well. I got that back up. And then while I was taking everything off, I decided to take off the mid pipe. After I readjusted everything, I took off the mid pipe, and I decided to do a little bit of adjustment, let's say, to the body of the car. This exhaust collector thing was banging on the side of the car while I was driving, and I was pretty sure that it was going to start banging again, so I just banged it myself with a sledgehammer and put just a little bit of adjustment into the body there. I have to add a little bit of rubberized undercoating. That turned a good day into a bad day real quickly. You see that end link? Yeah, it's ruined. Let's talk about what happened. So before I show you the one that was ruined, let me show you the one that wasn't ruined. You see, this was bought off of a group buy from Prelude Power a long time ago. I forget who even made them. But basically, the end link is threaded, and it's basically just an all thread. And we were using a nylon lock washer at the bottom with some polyurethane bushings in the middle and doing its job. And the idea was that you're supposed to adjust the height of the sway bar to the height of your car. So you put the car on the ground and you set the adjustment of this thing, and then you lock it in place. However, that did not lend itself well to longevity. Remember that nylon lock nut that we used on the other side? Well, it is stuck. And you see the impact that is on top of it? Yeah, now that's stuck on it. Because when it did not come off with a wrench, I put the impact on it, and it just ruined the end link itself. It bent it all out and spun around in circles and sent sparks flying, and yeah, this is going to have to be cut off from the other end and unthreaded and dropped out. So I need new end links. Yay. So I posted about my little bracket problem on Facebook on the third generation Prelude enthusiast Facebook group, and the word is that Karolina and Bober Garage also make rear end link bushings. So the only bad news about that is it's going to take a while to get here. Fortunately, since you don't technically need a sway bar in order to drive, we can continue making progress on that car while I wait for those parts to arrive, and then I'll put them on whenever that happens to be. So this is ready to go on the ground, but before I do that, I really want to feel good about something. I want to start this car up and hear it. I've done a lot of work on the exhaust, so I think that's going to change the exhaust note a little bit. It's going to change a lot of things, actually, because it's no longer going to be hitting the side of the car, hopefully, and it's not going to have exhaust leaks underneath the car, hopefully. So I want to check all that. I just want to know, before I even put this car on the ground, if I'm going to have to bring it right back up again. All right, well, that's really encouraging. Let's put this thing on the ground so we can check the ride height. So we have the Prelude on the ground, and just looking at the ride height, we still want to bring the rear up a little bit and the front down a little bit. I took some measurements, and the front is right at 25 inches at the center line of the wheel to the wheel well. It's right at 25, and the rear is like, well, the two sides of the rear are in different places, so and they're below that. So I kind of want to bring them all to, I don't know, I want to bring the front down to 24 and a half and probably the rear to 24 and, what is it, 5/8, just over a half, not quite 3/4. So I think that'll look really good just to have the rear raked up just slightly. So you know how I said the other side was right at about 24 and 5/8? Well, this is about 24 and 3/4. So this has to come down just a little bit if I want them to match, or I need to bring the other side up a little bit. But I'm really happy with where the other side is at. So I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to turn the shock 1/2 turn in. And I think that'll get me right where I want to be. I know I said you can do the four-wheel steering alignment with just this little tool here, this little tiny dowel rod. However, I did buy the tool, and I want to show you the differences because, like I said, if you're hard up on cash, this is a great way to go. You can get the alignment you need just with this. However, some of the problems are kind of the fact that this is such a simple thing. When you're putting this up in the rack, you're actually fighting gravity. So this wants to fall out as you're pushing it in, as you're putting the bolt in to hold it in place. And it really can be a little bit of a pain. And really, if you can, you should get this tool if you have the means. I'm not saying that you need it. I'm just saying that if you can get it, you may as well. It's a great tool to have because, first of all, just look at the size difference. This is going to be a lot harder to lose. This, I actually lost it for several weeks before I found it again. So this is going to be a lot harder to lose, and also this might actually be about 1 millimeter bigger than I measured on this one. So that's going to mean that the rack is going to hold tighter. You put this thing in, you screw it in, and the rack is going nowhere. It's going to have no play at all. And lastly, it's got this big, huge tag on it, and it screws in. So when you put this thing in the car, you're going to have this tag hanging down, and it's going to be deadly obvious that this thing is still in your car because this thing's going to be hanging down, and you're going to have a bolt hanging out somewhere that you'll probably lose. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and try the four-wheel steering alignment ourselves because once this thing is installed, the front and rear rack are locked at center. And I say that because the front and rear rack are mechanically linked, and they go together in a specific way. And they go together in such a way that if you're off, it's going to be very, very obvious. The front wheels are going to be turned in one direction, the rear wheels will be turned in another direction. So if you're anywhere near close, you're going to be dead on because of the notches in the pinions. Those notches in the pinions mean it only goes together in one position. So if you get the racks lined up, they're going to be lined up. So now you lock this thing at center, and suddenly you have front and rear wheels that are at 0, which means there's no guesswork, there's no recalibrations happening. You can do an alignment from the 0 position without a computer on this car. At least that's my hypothesis. So I want to try that out. So I had my wife come out and help. All she had to do was turn the steering wheel a little bit while I pushed this tool in, and it found center. So once I was able to get it in, all I had to do was turn the body of this thing, and it's locked in. The wheels are locked. This is fantastic. I received the camber alignment tool. This actually measures camber and caster, and it's actually pretty easy to use. So the car's not falling off the bricks, thankfully. Let's get a measure of what the camber is. It is quite negative. I'm going to lock this in place here and bring you over. You can see here the camber is quite negative. It is almost at 2 degrees. It needs to be like close to 0. I forget what the actual exact spec is, but I'm going to put it close to 0 and then recheck everything once the car is on the ground. But this is a really great indicator, and also visually you can see that it is quite negative. I mean, even from this angle you can see that it is pretty friggin' negative. So all we have to do, it's actually pretty easy. We got to get the wheel off the ground again and pull out the camber plates in the upper control arm just a little bit. Let's check some camber. Oh yeah, this is where we want to be, at least for now. Right at 0 for now. So if I want to adjust it later, going to be pretty much the same method, but I will have a much more complete idea as I get things dialed in on this car. So I'm kind of like going around and around. I know that if I were more experienced, I could probably get this all done in one go, but I know I'm not there. So I'm doing it, I'm getting everything as close as I can, and then I'm going to check again later, and then I'm going to probably do more adjustments, and then I'm going to check again after I do those adjustments. So I'm just taking my time. I have the time. I'm not going to get a rear sway bar for 4 more weeks. So not a sway bar, but the end links for the sway bar. I'm not going to get those for another 4 weeks. So I have the time. So I might as well take the time and learn a new skill, get some practice in, and see how good I can do without paying for a shop to do it. Even though I am spending more money on tools up front, if I can learn how to do this, I will save money over the lifetime of these tools. If you remember correctly, I put the rear centering tool in the rear rack, and now that it's on the ground, I have actually left that tool in there so that we can do another string alignment. So check this out. So we know the rear is locked at 0 because the tool has locked it at 0. So now let's check our string. So we see it right up against the wheel over here, but over here it is in a little bit. So actually let's pull this just a little bit tighter. So the idea here is that you line up the string to one side and then you check how it lines up on the other. So this needs to turn out just a little bit, and then on the front we have very clearly got a toe in situation because there's a gap over there in the front as well. So the front needs to turn out a little bit, and so does the rear. All right, I am gonna try to bring you in on this journey with me, but the phone is not at the most amazing of angles, and it looks like I've got a few unwanted guests here building webs. So, we need to loosen this, and I've got the wrong wrench. Let me go get the right wrench. All right, is this a 19? It's close enough to 19. It might actually be an 18. So we need to bring the wheel in on the back side. I'm gonna turn this guy to the right. Just a little bit. And see what that does. See there, there's just a little bit of gap left from back to front. I want to close that. I want to zero that out. I don't know. I still don't know what the actual spec is. I'm going to look that up once I get everything close to zero and then go from there. We need to bring it in. Probably just another couple of turns just like I did. Let's go. And now we're going to turn it. Okay, that's good. So the back is set. And since our back is the source of truth, I am hoping that by setting the rear, it'll give me a more reliable position to set the front, and then it'll be straight. This side is going to be a lot harder for you guys to participate in because the car is really low to the ground. I can't even see what I'm doing. I'm going to go by feel, but fortunately, I can see the jack stand here. I can see where the string is lined up. I can feel that I've got the wrong wrench. So why don't I go fix that? Let's see how 12 does up front. It's a 12 up front. So this needs to come in. So we're going to tighten because the tie rod is at the back of the wheel. It is nice being able to see my adjustments. To see it moving closer to the string. Then I can't feel what the hell I'm doing. Alright, so that's the front lined up at 0. Oh. That's my motorcycle mirror that I bent way out. So now we're zeroed out front and rear. We got to do the other side next, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, well, after about the 100th time of readjusting these things, this is as close as I care to get it, because I know the spec sheet calls for the front to be at dead 0, but the amount you have to move it to get it to dead 0 is so little that it's like margin of error. So this is dead 0. And watch how far I have to move it. Yeah, I mean, it's literally a millimeter. And it is so little that when I loosen the adjustment nuts to pull the camber plate out, you just move it too far. So I got it between a little too far and not far enough. And the bubble, you can see, is exactly the same on the driver's side. So I am calling this good enough. Next up, we're going to set the toe. So the front toe is 0, and the rear toe spec is positive 0.12. So it's a really, really small increment. And I kind of went overkill by getting the roller plates, but that's going to help me align other cars too. So it was a good investment even still. So 0.12 is a very, 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 very small increment, but we got to do it. And currently it's at 0. And again, I don't need to lock the wheels, the rear rack right now, because I've already done that. So we really are just moving this in relative to where it currently is. So its current position is 0. We've already set that using the string. So we did that when we locked the rear rack at 0 and used the string to set the toe on both the front and rear. So the front's in spec, the rear needs to come out by 0.12 degrees. And looking at this plate here, we're currently at 0, and that's 1 degree. So we need to move it like, it looks like from here, we need to move it to like there. It's literally like 1 turn of the tie rod. So it's not going to be a big adjustment, but it's going to be within spec once we're done. Now remember, when you've got expensive equipment and you're reading instructions on how to do it, always make sure to do it on a level surface and use both hands when handling this expensive equipment. It is now time to take on the caster. The caster, you still use the bubble level thing, but it has some specific instructions. It says here, before checking caster angles, tighten the four-sided pivot knob, which is this right here, and then unscrew the locking screw to allow movement of the vial block. This is the vial block. It's V-I-A-L, not, vial as in villainous. So we're going to unscrew this, and now the vial block moves. All right. The angled tip of the vial block represents a 15-degree angle. To determine caster, turn the front wheel out 15 degrees away from the body of the car. So if we're doing the passenger side, it's going to turn the wheel to the right 15 degrees. If we're doing the driver's side, it's going to turn the wheel to the left. All right. To determine the caster, turn the wheel out 15 degrees. While maintaining this position, raise and lower the vial block to 0 on the caster side of the vial block. Then we turn the wheel back in. The center bubble will then display your accurate caster reading. So we're going to turn it out, set it to 0, and then turn it in 15 degrees and see where we land from there. Hey gearheads, Devin from the future here. I just wanted to let you know of a little mistake I made. So in my video, you're going to see that I'm setting the caster using the caster plates and the caster alignment on the bubble tool, which is all well and good. However, I did make a mistake. I did not put the rear on boards to level out the car. So this adversely affected the caster measurement, and it turns out that after calibrating or checking the calibration again, we are at 0 or just a little bit negative, and I don't think that's the correct spec. It shouldn't be 0. So I need to readjust the caster on this car because I did not have it leveled from front to back. So I'm not going to re-record the entire sequence. I'm just going to, cut back to where I'm aligning and going through the process. So if you see that the rear of the car is not level, and before you start typing in the comments, you're doing it wrong, it's not level. I know. I fixed it. I promise I fixed it. And I'm going to fix this off camera, but I'm going to cut back to that sequence. So go ahead and leave a comment, because comments help the algorithm. Go ahead and tell me that I did it wrong, but just know that I fixed the mistake. I fixed the problem. So, and I've confirmed that those boards that are under the back tires are level with the plates because I used a level. Okay, you see the plate turned out to 15 degrees here. We're going to set this thing on, and I've already moved the block to show 0 degrees, and we're kind of close, but I'm going to have to adjust it just a little bit, and that's too far, and that's too far, and that's too far, and that's too far. Okay. All right, so we're at 0. Now we're going to turn it the other way and see where it lands. Okay, according to the specs, this car should be 2.3 degrees of caster up front. And we are at about 3.5. So I got to adjust the caster. The question is, how? How much? I know it has to do with the radius rod, but I don't know what direction to turn what. So that's going to be part of this adventure. Since I have no idea how to adjust the caster, we're going to resort to the old scientific method. And that is, of course, fuck around and find out. So I'm going to start with the radius rods. I'm going to unbolt the bolt that is in here. Just loosen it a little bit. If you can even see it, it's in here somewhere. I can't see it. There it is. I'm going to loosen it a little bit, and then I'm going to turn the adjustment that is somewhere on the radius rod. I think it's there somewhere. Again, I can't see anything. And then we're going to measure the caster again. Since it's still at 15 degrees, we're going to go and take a new measurement and see where the bubble lands. I will check back in with you once I know what I'm talking about. So the radius rod controls the length from the front crossmember to the lower control arm. So when you need to add a positive caster, you need to shorten the distance between the front crossmember and the lower control arm, because you're bringing it down and in as the wheels turn. You see what's happening is it goes kind of like that. The opposite, if you need to do negative caster, you need to lengthen the distance between the front crossmember and the lower control arm. So you are tightening and loosening as you go. So the nut on the front of the radius rod is what ultimately controls the distance. You need to have the front nut and the adjustment thing nut on the back tight at the end of the day, but that's where you kind of start the party. If you need to add length, you're going to loosen this nut and then tighten behind it. If you need to remove length, then you're going to loosen the nut in the back and then tighten the nut on the front. If that makes any sense. You really have to just do it in order to wrap your head around it. And the other thing about the Prelude specifically is that the radius rod is not the easiest thing to get a hold of with a wrench. And it regularly just falls off. I can't find the hex. I have to turn the wrench at a weird angle just because of that hole that it's in has a really strange cutout to it. So that was a complication. That was a lot of fun. And by a lot of fun, I mean pretty terrible. All right, so we've set the ride height. We've set the toe. We've set the camber. We've set the caster. I think the last thing we need to do is take this car for a test drive. Now, like I said, I'm still waiting on the sway bar end links. Those are going to arrive very soon. But in theory, you can drive this car without a rear sway bar. So let's test that theory while we're at it. So I'm pretty confident that nothing's gonna fall off, but I'm still, again, listening for any weird noises, any anomalous behavior. But now that I've done this extra work of setting the toe and all of this stuff, we're actually gonna pay a little more attention to how it actually drives. But again, we don't have that rear sway bar, so this may be completely academic. This may be for nothing. Doing about 20 right now. I'm just trying to feel everything out. I haven't driven this car in a long time because I've been doing so much work to it. Steering feels awesome. It always has, ever since I did the four-wheel steering conversion. This rack is really, really tight. Even compared to other four-wheel steering racks. I had a four-wheel steering Prelude that was originally four-wheel steering, and it didn't feel as good as this. So some of the feedback I'm getting, some of the corrections I need to make, I really have to think about. There's some car people. That's funny. They're all looking at my car. And like I said, without a rear sway bar, I'm actually feeling some strange behavior in the rear end. It's like as I go faster and faster, the rear end is just, it's horrible. It's bouncing me all over the place. Every little bump, one side's going and then the other side hits a bump and then the other side hits a bump. The whole rear end is not stable at all at speed. And this is just completely infuriating. This car is undrivable. Oh, I'm gonna be sick. You know what this means, right? It means this project has one more video left to go. That's just how it goes, you know? So that's going to wrap it up. If you like what you see, like, share, subscribe, comment. And if you don't like what you see, I certainly don't, leave a comment anyway. Let me know what you think caused this problem that I'm having. So far, the internet has not been able to guess what it is. I know exactly what's wrong with it, and I'm going to reveal it in my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.